Welcome to Drunk on Software.
Do you want to introduce our guests?
Today, we have with us Rob Rusher. Doo-doo! And Adam Flater. Doo-doo!
Love the sound effects.
That's right. We're low tech here.
James, it's like midnight. My wife wants to know where I am, and you want to talk about something geeky.
Yes.
And I'm not sure I care, but I'll probably end up arguing. So why don't you start it off?
So I think there's a question that we began with when I tweeted that HBO.com was a Flex app. And according to the jamesward.com/isitflex tool, it is a Flex app. That tool decompiles a Swift file.
Is that jameswardisatool.com or just want to clarify? And it really ruins the shtick when I have to grab the mic to ask that.
Why am I so fuzzy? I feel like I'm out of focus. I was out of focus. It's better now. So what we determined was that HBO.com, if decompiled, says that it was compiled with MXMLC, which is a tool in the Flex SDK, which can be used to either compile projects using MXML, ActionScript, Flex Framework, any combination thereof, into a Swift file. So my contention is that if someone is using the Flash developer tooling called the Flex SDK to create Flash content, then it is thus Flex. Which I think raises a lot of controversy because the typical belief is that, actually, Adam, maybe you should just state the adversarial viewpoint.
All right. Well, first, to kind of back up a little bit, the reason that came up was I think our CEO emailed me because we at Round Arch we built HBO, and he's like noticed the tweet and he said, I thought this James Ward guy really knew his stuff. I guess we fooled him. So I guess that's impressive that we fooled him. I was like, no, I think he just has a different thing. So anyway, we thought that.
Said, wow.
Yeah.
This application, it actually works. It must be Flex. When I click on it,
That's a different discussion.
When I click on the track of a scroll bar, it actually scrolls.
Right. So
That aren't Flex don't do that.
I think most people, because Flex started with a framework and a IDE called Flex Builder, which is now called Flash Builder, and that's part of the confusion. People kind of associate Flex apps. I'm a Flex developer. I build Flex apps with the Flex framework. And it is true that the SDK, the software development kit, is a collection of the framework, the compilers, the API documentation, ASDoc generator. So I guess that's what the confusion is about. But it also goes back to maybe not a site like HBO.com, but sites that are purely ActionScript could also be developed with Flash Professional, the IDE that's typically used for animations. So I think there's some strange messaging from product team maybe, or the products in general, Flash and Flex, and where they stop and start.
Yeah, so my perspective on this is that the word Flex is kind of broadening to be much more than just the Flex framework. The evidence of this is that if you look at Flex Mobile Framework, will be essentially a different framework, but will still be called Flex. So this really brings into question, what does it mean to be Flex? I think it should use the same SDK, just a different component set. I mean, this is yet to be determined or publicly announced, but my assumption is that the Flex Mobile Framework would use the same SDK,
So we're breaking that.
but with a different component framework.
Drunk on software.
Why am I so blurry? Am I that drunk?
You're always blurry.
The audience just got drunk.
That
Cheapest
is,
camera you can get in San Francisco on 2 days notice, 2 hours notice.
if I'm right here, I think I stay in focus. Okay, so now I'm falling over. Okay, so this brings into question, what does it mean to be flex, right? And I think another way to look at this is that if we look at flex and say, well, there's components, or not components, sorry, that's a bad way to say it. If there are pieces of the Flex framework like MXML data binding, what if other frameworks like Reflex and Razorberry also support MXML and data binding? Then how can we not call those Flex, but call the Flex mobile framework Flex, right? Thoughts?
Well, what if it's more than that? Maybe there's an in-between. All right, so the in-between is that if I build something with the MXML compiler, as you're suggesting, well, that's adding in extra things like the keyframes that it's putting stuff into. Whereas if you build it with the Flash IDE, you actually start off with those keyframes and you add ActionScript to it. So that may be one of the key defining things that says,
Is this frame-based or is this...
Yeah, is it frame-based or does the compiler put that together for you? Now, does that separate it, or is it still the Flex SDK as Adam's contending?
Am I creating Flash content in a frame-based methodology or in a object-oriented code-based methodology? Well, and that's a distinction I would like to draw, and not say like this is an ActionScript only project or this is a like I think that as we move to more than just the Flex framework in the Flex ecosystem or in the Flash doing development on Flash ecosystem, that we want to have some brand that describes all the different ways that you can do development, object-oriented development on the Flash platform. And we don't really have that brand today unless it's Flex, but there's controversy over that. And Adam, when I told him this earlier, said, yeah, and I want the, what'd you say? I want a Porsche.
I think I said I want everybody to get along and not have wars.
That's right. That's right. So you're like, wishful thinking is, yeah. Wishful thinking is sure fun.
Well, okay, so yeah, it almost sounds like two discussions, like what do we want Flex to be, what is it now, right? I think it does make sense for Flex to be sort of like the RIA brand, the OO brand for Adobe or Flash Player Air generated stuff, right? Because you could do stuff with Air or Flash Player that's not OO, that's not really what we call an RIA. And then that should be called something else, I guess. But there's a lot of confusion over all the branding, and like I think it started out that Flex developers, Flex apps meant I use the Flex framework and I use Flex Builder. Now the landscape, IntelliJ, FDT, there's a lot of other IDEs that you can use, and you still use the SDK. There's, like you said, there's things like Reflex coming out and other things like that, which are definitely RIA frameworks. Are they Flex frameworks? I don't know. I guess they use the Flex compiler probably. So it's a lot easier with other technology sets to say, this is a Java app. It runs in the Java VM. I wrote it with the Java language. And even more, I can say, this is a Swing Java app, right? So, but it's not right for us to say, this is a Flex Flash app. Maybe because it sounds weird. But that would be the equivalent, right? A Swing Java app would be a Flex Flash app.
Hi. You can't really answer because of our setup, but how much of it is not, if you take the Java comparison, how much of it is not wanting to be grouped in with JSP developers who call themselves Java programmers? Because on Java, right? Well, I'd like to think I'm a cut above the guy that hacks a JSP file and opens a database connection in line 2, but
That's wrong.
not for an evangelist. But you don't write tests either.
Yeah.
Sorry, we've been hanging out too long today. I'm kind of feeling free to say whatever I want to you.
Go ahead and do that. He makes those jokes in his presentations. I think it's okay.
There's a difference between self-deprecating and your friend throwing bombs at you on camera.
That's true.
But I love you, James. I don't mind that you don't test. When I don't test, I just say, "Oh, I was trying to emulate James Ward." No, I like Java is an interesting comparison for me because when I build Java, I grab crap from everywhere. You know, I can't find a jar I don't want to throw at the problem. So, you know, I don't need a vendor. I have an open source implementation of my container, and I could go get somebody else's JVM. I could use, you know, this doesn't really happen much anymore, but we definitely deployed apps on Jikes and other people's JVMs back in the day.
Thank you.
Can I film the chicken wings? 'Cause I'm starving. Please stand by. Luckily, we didn't get the audio on that. I don't think I'm getting the wings, but it's not worth the effort. No, so like Java, right? One of the distinctions is they intended for other people to implement. Say what you want about the spec process. The intent is multiple vendors implementing competing things that are all called Java. That doesn't exist with Adobe. They're not, like, one of the places I want to go from here is why isn't Adobe interested in community contributions? Because that's part of the problem is they're drawing a wall and saying, no, all the things Flex are going to come internal. And with Java, right and wrong, right, they said, here's a spec, go build it. And that certainly has its own problems. But
I don't know if they've done that.
Yeah, so I don't know if Adobe sort of have really drawn that line in the sand, like intentionally, but they sort of have done it by the way they act around it, right? Like, it is an open platform. It's not, oh, here comes a wing. Not necessarily much open source really going on, like in terms of outside contributions. And,
classic question, what does open source mean?
well, yeah, that's a different discussion, right? Like, but anyway,
Adobe's definition is a license.
it is a license. So at least there is some openness there, right? But
There is some.
I think there are people at Adobe, especially evangelists, who like the contribution of the community and those open source stuff. And, you know, and I've actually had people talk to me from inside of Adobe about using Merapi and that they've used Merapi, you know, and like Tour de Flex used it in Eclipse, right? I think the competing Flex frameworks will have the same, when they kind of are out and mature and released, people are going to use them inside Adobe, and they're going to say like, hey, actually this one's really good for building XYZ kind of app. We also have a lot of different microarchitecture frameworks. Some are good at some things, some are good at others. Like, you know, so I do think that exists in a way. It's just that the technology and the community isn't as mature as Java. So you can't go and find a jar to throw at, or a SWIC, I guess, to throw at whatever problem you have in front of you. Sometimes you have to hack it together yourself or find multiple things to put together.
All right, now let's throw a different analogy at this. Silverlight. So when you talk about Silverlight, well, if I build it in C# or .NET or whatever,
C# or VB.
or VB, you know, so they're both still Silverlight applications. They use different compilers.
Python, Iron Ruby, Iron Python.
Is that the player supports all that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have
The DLR.
Right. CLR.
so what was that? Ruby
No,
Ruby with Iron
TLR is the player.
The DLR is the dynamic language runtime on the CLR. Right.
Ruby with Iron what?
Iron Ruby and
Iron-
Python.
Iron Ruby and Iron
Those are a lot
Python.
of different languages.
Yeah, so there's a lot of the point is there's a lot of different ways to compile down to that platform, and we have that same analogy in the Flash platform. Now, does it really matter? Well, if I'm trying to figure out if it's a Flex app or not, MXML-C isn't a guaranteed. Like, if the compiler is MXML-C, it's not a guarantee that it used MXML. Now,
Or the framework.
or the framework.
I think what you're saying is that really ultimately the best brand to use here is to say that we're Flash developers. But no one wants to call themselves Flash developers. I mean, no one I hang out with, but I hang out with weird people.
James, what if Lee Brimlow compiled his Bang Bros video with MXML-C? Is that a Flex app?
No comment on anything Lee does. It'll get me in trouble with Adobe PR. Any comments, though, on the Flash developer? Does anybody want to call themselves a Flash developer?
Yeah.
I'm not a Flash developer. I'm a Flex developer.
You have to add platform. So I'm a Flash platform developer, and that's a lot different because
It still has the word Flash in it, which is a bad word in some circles.
but it doesn't imply the tool, right? So it doesn't say I'm a Flash Pro animation designer person. I'm a Flash platform developer, just like somebody were to say I'm, a Swing developer, or you're still developing toward that Java platform. You're still developing toward the Flash platform.
Totally agree, but I still don't want to call myself a Flash anything developer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got the punch the monkey thing, the banner ad thing.
The skip intro.
Right, your point about
You had to throw in a monkey, didn't you?
yeah. Your point about Silverlight is interesting because they developed that player basically for IRAs. They didn't really develop. I mean, yeah, it does video and stuff like that too, but it's not really an animation platform as much as where like Flash came from.
Right.
So that's just the legacy that's inherited with the brand and the player.
Right.
So I don't know, good or bad. It's what we've got.
Well, I would have to say there's still the Flash animation designer, the game designers that can use Flash Pro. That is completely different than the application space, which is predominantly Flex-based applications or ActionScript-based applications that are built using the MXML compiler. So I really think that you end up with three distinct spaces. There's your Flash developer, and then there are your developers that are using the MXML compiler, although some could be using the Flex SDK and MXML, or they can be using strictly ActionScript 3. So am I a Flash developer, an ActionScript developer, and a Flex developer? I don't know. It's plausible.
So that's the very nuanced view of the Flash community, I think. Flex, Flash, ActionScript, MXMLC. I want to know, if you're not inside the Flash community, who's to blame for not having Flash on the MaxiPad?
The Tampod?
Tampod. I wish we were all on camera because I made Adam laugh, and that makes me happy.
Actually, there's a joke in our office that we have an office in Boston too, and well, Chicago, whatever. It was a joke that like when that came out, like, what do you mean? What is this iPad thing? I thought that's what the thing you played music on.
Gigantic iTouch.
There's a lot of people that already called the iPods iPods. I can't even do the accent, but
Just do your best Goodwill Hunting. I'm eating a chicken wing.
No, we don't edit.
We don't edit, so it's drunk on software policy. Against the strong advice of many.
All right, so ultimately what we've decided about the Flex brand is that there is no easy solution.
maybe you should put a watermark on everything with MXMLC. This says Flex app.
We've talked about that.
Okay.
I actually decided that I don't think hardly anybody cares, except for very intelligent, overly involved, in mostly good ways, people of the Flex community.
True, but at this point, but I think that so if you're a developer and in a few years Reflex or Razorberry or these other frameworks really catch on and you learn these frameworks, then and then you want to put something on your resume, could you put Flex on your resume even if you're using MXML, ActionScript, data binding, all these things, but just not using the Flex component model?
So if you're Ben, Dion, Matt Rabel, whoever, open web people, do they care, or are we all just Flash people that play with this silly little VM? That was for you, James, because you have the context on what I'm asking.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Do you think that Ben and Dion care if it's an Adobe provided SDK or if it's not? They just think we're all people that are playing with Flash, right?
I mean, it's all to those Java people. I mean, it's still a VM. It's the Flash VM or the ActionScript VM. So it's just one. It's one with a better UI because Java's UI is lackluster at best. So it's a VM with a better user interface that we can build these applications. Is it as robust as the JVM? No, not even close. But it definitely does a lot that we need to have done, and it has a much better look and feel.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I like James' point about if you use other frameworks and you build RIAs, can you say you're a Flex developer? Can you say you build Flex apps? Because, so I've been a consultant for a number of years, and it's hard to sell clients on, like, if they know something that's backed by a company, like Adobe, as Flex, and you're going to use that, either they've already had experience with it or they know it, they know Adobe. It is actually a easier sell in an organization to sell something like that than to sell, like, I'm going to go use this framework that 3 guys built out of their garage. It runs in the Flash player, but yeah, it's these guys that built this thing, and it's trust me, it's much better. And in a lot of cases, especially enterprises, we'd have a better shot at saying we do Flex and we actually use the framework, but maybe monkey patch the whole thing, versus saying, oh no, it's not Flex, it's like this other thing that's like Flex. So that would be really helpful if you could say, like, I do build Flex apps and I use a different framework, but it still has some credibility associated with it. Like building a Java app in whatever, I don't know what the analogy is, but maybe you can think of one.
SWT instead of
SWT and Swing, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's a huge difference between having a Laszlo app or a curl app, which are both great tools for what you can build with them, but they do not have the enterprise company behind them to back it, no matter how good or bad you may think they are.
So, I think that was insightful. No, thank you on the chicken wings.
They're a little oversized.
There are some large wings. Okay, so the next topic we were going to discuss was there is no...
Now I have to have a chicken wing.
Yes, you do. Have a chicken wing. There is no standards body around Flash, Player, AVM, Flex. There's nothing like the JCP. This is something we talked about last time we had Adam on the show. And what are your thoughts on where we're at with this currently, Adam?
How long ago was that? Maybe a year. Was it a year ago? I don't think we're in any better state for that. I think what a lot of people see and use Flash or Flex for is, one, it can get you a job because there's a lot of jobs out there. It's a good market to be in as a Flex developer, right? 2, it's a framework, especially with the language like MXML being declarative, that you can do things rapidly with. So I think I see people even faster with Catalyst. I'm not sure if that was a joke. I think it was. Anyway. Yeah, no, that was John. James didn't say that. He would never say that. I don't know what my point was now.
Let me call up Doug.
Oh, the standards body, yeah. So I think people are taking and kind of running with it on their own and just kind of like if what's offered isn't what I want, then I'm just going to do my own thing, right? And are less concerned about coming together to because frankly,
right?
Yeah.
Part of the context last time was that there was a call and there was momentum from the Adobe side on.
People are going to get so grossed out watching you.
Put down your booze. I don't think you can see me. Look at the resolution on that.
Yeah, there's a big email list about Flex 4.
What's the momentum?
Yeah.
That was the context.
Something committee, blah 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 thing, which. it's not really there anymore, right? As far as I know, I don't do anything with that.
Well, it steered us into the whole namespace.
The namespace thing was the big issue, and I think people stopped caring after things kept going kind of a way that we're unsure about. Like,
I've heard that people have blamed delays in Flex 4 on that whole decision.
what people have done that? That's an interesting thing to hear.
He was just telling me this. Simi was just telling me this today. He was saying that people hate him because people are personally blaming him for delays in Flex 4.
Listen, Simeon is a good guy, so anybody out there that has beef with him, I don't know what you're talking about. No, I think there's like recent iterations in the framework. Like I still think Flex 4 is a good direction in general, but
For developers or designers?
for developers or designers, for developers, but they're starting to one of the problems with Flex 3 was that it really tied itself strongly to inheritance, right? That was like one of the clear problems that everybody starts to discover as you use it. As these latest iterations of the SDK have come out, the framework have come out, there's more inheritance tied into it with like extending group and things like that. And there's other issues too. The lack of interfaces in some cases. I still don't like. I do think that Flex 4 will probably result in a better Flex 5, let's say, but it's a baby step it's going to be a hard path for a lot of people. And yeah, it's better than 3.5. It's better than 3 as an architecture, but it's not going to be a painless step.
There was this whole steering committee and open iterations. What happened with those? When was the last time we did an open iteration meeting? Does that matter?
Well, Rob, you go ahead.
Well, I'm going in a different direction. Honestly, I think it's a good direction to take the language to be a more robust, strong language that is, more developer focused. Well, the language is, so your ActionScript 3 in general and your future versions of ActionScript, but making it a better language so that we can create more robust applications, but at the same time coming in with tools like Catalyst that can generate at least some of the I guess non-complicated side that there is a significant piece of applications, maybe not business applications at this point because Catalyst doesn't even do a data grid yet, but
It does. It's just a Halo data grid.
but I mean it's there is a place for both sides, and I like the fact that Flex could go that direction and make it a more robust language, but also giving tools for those people that can't do what we do, giving them an option. I think it's a good direction.
Yeah, I think that's, the WYSIWYG promise has been around forever, and no one's really delivered on it. Technology tends to mature and get more complex at a rate that those kinds of tools become more and more difficult to create. So I believe, I hope that Catalyst is a great tool. I think for a skinning workflow, I think for interaction design, it could be pretty useful. I think for building an app, I'm pretty skeptical. But
Not there for an app. It's not there for the complex apps.
some
yet,
people
but
show demos about building apps with it.
Could it get there?
Some people who will remain nameless that sit at this table. No, but back to the steering thing. Like, I think, I don't know. People get busy. People get off and decide we'll build our own framework in a couple cases, right? And people maybe don't. I don't want to totally say no one is heard and people's, because the namespace thing was taken care of, but it took a lot of effort. So those voices for a revolt, yeah, of sorts. Like, but people in the community who build apps being heard is very a big, difficult challenge right now, and I think a lot of people have just kind of given up about like, yeah, I'll take it, I'll rewrite what I need to, and I'm not going to like scream anymore,
Well, that's the big problem when you get, you get 5 architects in the room discussing a problem, you'll get 10 different opinions, right? So and then they'll argue them ferociously.
I think, and I don't want to get controversial here, but I think the difference between many of the quote-unquote community architects is they're actually taking these technologies and having to build real apps with them. And I'm not convinced, and I don't think this is unique to Adobe in any way, but I'm not convinced that the people building some of the tools are having to do that. So I think that's a place where I see a big distinction and why those voices need to be given more of a role. You don't want to argue with me, James?
He doesn't want to lose his job.
I put you to sleep over there. No,
Next topic.
I don't think the community is infallible, and I don't think the vendor's evil. I think that
That was a good quote. I like that one.
everybody sucks. That's the short version. Everybody's poop stinks. No, I'm not convinced there's enough of that. And if you ever edit our Mike Labriola episode, I think he agrees with us. Because he spends a lot of money on booze to get his way.
He's one.
Wait, repeat your quote again.
I can't remember.
The community is not infallible, and the vendor's not evil.
Still it. You can put it on
John Rose. The community is
Put it on Twitter, and then it's yours.
Twitter. Community is not infallible, and the vendor's not evil. That was a quote, right?
That means I love a lot of people at the vendor. I'm curious of the status of your competition, James. Do you have more Twitter followers than the unnamed person who you're chasing that doesn't know you're chasing them?
I will by the time.
When you and I unfollow that person, you'll pass them?
It's time to celebrate. I have reached my goal. I now have more Twitter followers. Here.
Those are good glasses.
That matters.
James, what else do you want to talk about? Throw out something that a non-Flex developer. Do we care about non-Flex developers? Because I want to be an Android developer. That's what I decided today.
So Adam's been playing with Silverlight quite a bit. I'm interested in his thoughts about where Silverlight has some advantages over Flash.
And we go back and edit and put this part at the beginning? Because this sounds really interesting to me.
I don't even know where James could be going with this. Oh, wait. Maybe I do. Yeah. No,
necessarily. I have like 10 Twitter.
no, so yeah, I did some training. I've been playing with Silverlight, doing some things. I think that they've made a strong push, especially with the features in Silverlight 4 versus Flex 4. Another strong advantage is C# as a language. In fact, like when I started to get into C#,
Link.
I don't know. Link is great.
Unreal.
Link is great. I don't know. I got into C# maybe a little bit over a year ago, coming from a Java Flex background, and I have to say, like, I kind of like C# as a language even better than Java. As an OO language. And so the fact that you can write in that C# language and run client-side code in it, that's a pretty big winner. The Visual Studio tool's really very good as well. There's some things that you miss coming from Eclipse, but you can kind of get most of them through add-ons. So in terms of...
I don't understand the whole assembly thing.
Yeah, assemblies are... I don't know that I completely understand it yet. And the idea of managed code, unmanaged code. But .NET has been around for a while, so they've based their RIA platform on this .NET framework that runs in the scaled-down .NET that runs in the Silverlight player. I think it's going to be a pretty strong competition. I think the hardest thing for Microsoft to overcome is the ubiquity of the Flash player right now. When we see upwards of 90% ubiquity, and you want to hit customers outside the firewall, the 40-50% of Silverlight right now is a tough pill to swallow. As easy as the install process is, but the framework is pretty competitive. Microsoft has a pretty good partnership with vendors that create third-party component sense. They have a pretty good, partnership with partners who create apps. So I'm glad that in terms of RIA platforms, it's not like Flex and Ajax anymore. And now it looks like Ajax is kind of losing the support, and it's really more like Silverlight and Flex. So as a Flex developer, I'm really glad to see that competition and to actually go and play with another platform that competes and pushes and innovates in a way that Flex does.
Wait, did you say that Ajax is losing? So one, I would ask, what is Ajax? Because I group HTML5 with that, and I see momentum there. And two, why is your perception that it's losing ground? Because my perception is that it's still the other half of the world, and the other half's 95%, and us Flash people are 5% or whatever. I mean, I'm not trying to throw accurate numbers out, but
I think we also need to distinguish a bit between people who are writing like whole apps in Ajax, JavaScript, DHTML, and people that are building like some incremental part to an existing app with it. Because anyone that's using HTML primarily for their app can easily adopt JavaScript as a small part of their application.
So I agree that that's a fair distinction, but what percentage of web code, not lines of code, but functionality, would you guess are in traditional browser technologies versus Flash application functionality? I mean, this kind of goes to the question of the distinction of content and applications that we were kind of getting at earlier, but it seems like most web things are not Flash still.
Well, that's okay. So
wrong application functionality.
So here's I think the distinction here is that the reason. Okay, so why I said that about Ajax is what I meant is that JavaScript as a ECMAScript untyped scripting language is not a ideal thing to maintain as a code base. So most of the things that we see as Ajax apps are emitted, as out of Google Web Toolkit or something like that, right? A JSP that has some script with it. So it's a higher level framework that generates this stuff. Like coding a full JavaScript. Not that it can't be done. Like there's apps like Meebo, which are really great.
Grouping GWT into that, or are you saying?
No, I'm not grouping. I think that's
Okay.
So
that kind of answers my question, because I group all those together, and I feel like those frameworks have very much gotten traction, and
yeah.
particularly if you look at them all together. I mean, there's a lot of them, but it seems like they're each playing a relevant role. Not each, but GWTs and jQueries, and you can kind of go down the list. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's also that none of them are. There's not parity between them, so to group them together is difficult. But you can get a higher level bit than just raw JavaScript in the browser. To me, that's an Ajax app. So.
Kind of like a Flex app.
Yeah, exactly. So stupid point back to rat hole. They do. They have a harder brand, but they also have more mind share, I think. And it doesn't seem strange to say that to me, though.
But it's also fragmented, the mindshare, right? It's like the mindshare is across all different kinds of frameworks and platform, whatever. So let's get back to but yeah, I think the point is that with Flex and or we could even say ActionScript and Silverlight, it's a different, like you can actually architect and use software design patterns and use OO a lot, because the languages were designed for it, frankly, and JavaScript really wasn't, right? It's a little scripting language that adds on. Well, no, ActionScript is probably closer to JavaScript than it is to C#, but hopefully that changes. But in any case, yes, I think they're very strong competitors with points that they differ on. This is Silverlight and Flex again, and ubiquity being a key one in terms of reach for that Flash wins at, clearly, depending on your audience, but outside the firewall, it's winning at. Frameworks and tooling, I think, are fairly similar. Microsoft has been at the XAML blend thing longer than Adobe's been at the FXG Catalyst thing, and they're different in the way that they're implemented. So we'll see when Catalyst releases. And in terms of your comment on HTML5 before, I mean, I think this conversation so far has been about things that exist, right? And to me, it's kind of like a fairy, right? Like, it's a fantasy until it's out there and people can build apps and browsers really support it. So it's not irrelevant to bring it into the conversation at this point, in my opinion.
Fuck Steve Jobs. Hope you can hear that. I love Steve Jobs. I hope he gets better. Here's a question that maybe you just had your answer, Adam, but that I keep asking people at our office. If you couldn't use Flex or Flash, what would you be building apps in today?
For the Flash player? When you say apps?
Yeah, well, so on our conversation earlier, I'm going to go with Rob's term because I liked it the best out of anything I heard. If you couldn't build a Flash platform application, what would you be building in today?
Mud bricks. Wait, define apps. Are you talking about mobile apps?
Okay, so for me, you have to personalize it. For me, I'm building mostly applications and enterprises. So heavy business features, lots of data. Some are in the browser, some are on the desktop, and none are. Small portions are mobile and typically native, so I'm throwing mobile out for me. But I don't actually know what my answer is. That's why I'm asking.
If I wasn't using the Flash platform to build apps,
And if Adobe didn't pay your paycheck.
and if Adobe didn't pay my paycheck, then I would be using Android for mobile apps. I wouldn't be building desktop apps at all because no one builds desktop apps anymore.
Did you just blow up Air completely?
Air's great for mobile if you can use Flash platform. And for the web, I would be probably using GWT.
What if you were a Visual Studio person with 10 years of experience? You're not going to use GWT.
I'd be using Silverlight.
Okay.
Just wanted you to say it.
If I were slitting my wrist because I was a say it on camera.
If I didn't care about having any credibility in the Java community.
You would use Cold Fusion.
Oh, ouch.
That was a quote. That was a quote.
Okay, next.
What would you use?
Oh, what would I use? Well, I came I came from the DHTML world, so I would probably be in some framework based on that, which would be more like the GWT or some variant of that. I don't know. There's lots of different options. Which one would actually be something DHTML based? Would definitely be the way.
I'm going to steal the Android answer. I think that's going to be a platform that blows up in the next year or two, like on a lot of devices.
Do you think there's any way that they'll be able... Do you think Google's working on some way to run Android apps in the browser? Or if there would be some way to...
Yeah, I don't know. Android apps in the browser would be interesting. I mean, Google would be creating a plugin then, or using the JVM, and then that wouldn't be a good idea.
They're already doing bytecode generation. Why not just generate Flash bytecode from an Android app?
I suppose you could generate Android into Flash. I don't... Yeah, who knows? I mean, again, if we're talking about real things and not fantasy, yeah, I would definitely turn to Android platform and do a lot of work with that.
We were talking about HTML5, so let's
Right.
keep...
I don't think you can completely throw it out right now.
If we're throwing out plugins in the browser, then I would say GWT or something like it. Otherwise, I would definitely say Silverlight, and it would still be like ASP.NET is not something I wouldn't consider. I'm not kidding. Like the new stuff isn't. The new stuff isn't bad actually. Yeah, sorry. That's what it is.
I was actually just surveying to figure out where I should take my career next, so I'm going to go home and order some Android books.
Silverlight wouldn't even exist.
Silverlight wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for the creation of Future Splash, some decade or so ago, which is now Flash, of course. So to say, what would I be doing without Flash? Well,
Right.
It would have to be something based on technologies that are nowhere near that. So I don't think Silverlight's just a Microsoft's attempt to copy what Adobe's doing.
In some ways, yeah. I think certain Microsoft employees would probably disagree with that in other ways, in terms of like they would say WPF as a declarative language existed before MXML, blah blah blah. So and then Adobe would say, hey, no, like so it's up for debate. But the Flash player, yes. Silverlight player, yes, came after and it was designed kind of based on it.
It's a great idea, and that's why Microsoft is going that direction, because it is a great idea. And, everybody is going to find it to be useful, so...
I'm going to give the chicken wings a 4.5 out of 10.
Rough.
Well, and they were too oversized. It was a challenge to eat them without splattering on the camera. I'm going to give the scotch a 8.5.
Really, that's it?
I didn't want to overrate it with you scotch snobs. I actually thought it was fabulous. But after getting yelled at for my ice earlier and my scotch, I don't mind being outed.
Drunk on software, man.
There's a lot of ways to get drunk.
Yeah, that's true.
And we have our side domain, crunkонsoftware.com. So don't knock it. But
Smoking crack.
in Boulder. No, that's our high on software. Sorry, I can't keep them straight. But anyway, our wives are wondering where we are. It's a snowy night in Denver.
That's medical marijuana.
I won't tell you the Gorilla drug policy on camera. But basically, I'm going to go. So you guys can keep talking, but we're getting kicked out.
Ciao.
Tell these guys thanks. Say thanks, James. James, say thanks, James.
Thanks, Adam, Rob. Appreciate you guys coming on Drunk on Software. It's been good.
For having us.
Good night.